Hello, my beautiful friends. I am Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I am so deeply and profoundly blessed to get to do this work in the world. I love the work that I do. I love getting to connect with you. I love coming into the light with other soul-inspired people. And so I have a number of offerings that I bring forward in my work, which include one-on-one angel sessions, soul mentoring, and beautiful, inspiring classes that I offer over Zoom. The work that I do is beautifully intimate. My classes are small in size. I also offer one-on-one sessions. And so one of the things I love so much about it is I really get to know you and you get to know me too. It's lovely and it is something that fills my whole heart. And I feel so grateful that I get to share it with you. And this podcast is one of the ways that we get to connect. So thank you so much for finding your way to this broadcast and for listening. I know you have a lot of different options out there, and I'm grateful that you have chosen to spend some time here with me and with the angels as well. So this is a sleep podcast, but you are also welcome to use this during your waking hours. This is infused with a lot of love, so whenever you choose to listen, the angelic love will flow to you. It's always flowing to you, just so you know. You don't need this podcast to connect with angelic love. But I do find that broadcasts like this help to amplify our awareness and our connection to the love of the angels. And so my hope is that that happens for you here. We're going to be together for about an hour. The reason the episodes are so long is because as someone who listens to sleep podcasts every night, I prefer the longer episodes because this way I don't feel pressured to fall asleep too quickly. There are some podcasts out there that I love, but they're only 20 minutes long, and I usually am not asleep by the end of them, and then it starts my whole cycle of awareness that I'm not yet asleep, which is not helpful. So these episodes are an hour long. So you have plenty of time to drift off. There's 2 parts to each episode. This first part that we're in, this is the part where I share with you a little bit about the spiritual journey, and I bring in the angels, and we really focus on bringing in that angelic love. And that usually runs 15 to 20 minutes. And then we go into story time. Story time might be stories from my life that I share with you. I might read to you something that's in the public domain. I might flip through the pages of an old recipe book or an old magazine and share some of my memories with you that are brought up as we go through old recipes or old TV guides. So I mix it up a little bit. I think it's a wonderful thing about doing a sleep podcast is just about anything fits into sleep-worthy material. And I know it might sound strange to create hour-long content that you may not be able to remember after you've listened to it. But it's okay because it's serving its purpose. It's here to keep you company. It is my honor and blessing to be a loving, soothing companion for you for the next hour. And my heart is filled with gratitude that we get to spend this time together. So I invite you to take a nice deep breath in. Listen, I know you are breathing all the time because you are here, but there is something about that intentional breath in and out that helps us get centered into the present moment, and especially helps us get centered in to the love of the angels. Now, I have been enchanted with this concept of the angels for a long time now. I can't say that I knew about them through childhood. I think I probably had sort of the same touchstones as other people did, reading fairy tales and things like that. But my true opening to the angels happened in the late 90s and early 2000s. When I really started having these beautiful, visceral experiences of divine, expansive, limitless love that was coming in from the divine realms. And it was so unlike the love I had known on the earth plane. It's not that I have not been well loved in this life. I most certainly have. I'm so grateful for that. But the kind of love I would feel streaming in had no limits. There were no boundaries on it. It just existed. It had nothing to do with my worthiness or my accomplishments or my personality. It simply existed. I've never had a near-death experience, but I've been fascinated by them, and perhaps you have been too. And when I hear what people share about going to the light and feeling this love coming through, that's this kind of love I feel in working with the angels. The best metaphor I can bring to you about what it's like is to go outside on a sunny day. I know this is a strange metaphor, but notice how the sun shines upon you in abundance. And there's no part of your consciousness that wonders if you are worthy of the sun, or if you might use up too much sun and there won't be enough sun for other people. The sun exists. It is. It is a force of energy and light that exists, that we can rely upon. And even on cloudy days, even during the night when it is not visible, we know it is there. And it will return because it is there. It always exists. And that's the best metaphor I can give to you about this experience of divine love. It is. It exists. And when we learn to open and tune to it, it is like being in direct sunlight and feeling the warmth on your face and knowing it is here. So it is my intention to help bring this to you. And we all feel it differently. I'm not saying it should feel like the sun. It's not a direct correlation. But it's a metaphor for the abundance, for the reliability of it. And I feel divine love in a lot of different ways. But I mostly feel it in my heart. I feel this expansive, beautiful presence coming in. Another thing about the angels is my experience of them is they have great senses of humor. So you totally can joke around with your angels. You do not have to just address them with reverence. I think many of us who grew up in monotheistic religions were used to bringing a lot of reverential consciousness and behavior in our engagements with God. And listen, that's also beautiful. It is beautiful to come forward in reverence, in honor, in sacred contemplation. I love that as well. And also in your day-to-day life with the angels and with God, it's okay to be informal. It's all right to say, hey guys, I could use some help down here. Because remember, the angels know you. They know your true heart. They know who you are. They love you. Every single part of you. Even the parts you find hard to love about yourself, your angels love about you. The angels understand the complexity of the human incarnation. The way my guides describe it, they say you go through the portal of amnesia. And you forget everything that came before your birth. And then you rediscover who you are. But the angels truly know who you are beyond this lifetime. They know the beauty and the brightness, the bigness of your spirit. They know who you are, and they have tremendous compassion and love for your very essence of all that you are. So I invite you to take another nice deep breath in with me and just let it go. Whatever your it is, let it go. Whatever came before this moment, whatever feels heavy, just whatever feels like you're carrying it and you don't want to carry it anymore, just let it go. And allow your angels to be with you. And I'm going to say a prayer to invite the angels forward. They're already here, but I love sharing the ritual with you. So beautiful angels on high, thank you so much for this time together. Thank you, angels. I ask that you bring your beautiful energy, your beautiful loving forward in a way where each of our beloveds can come into direct knowing, feeling your love, knowing that they are loved beyond time and space. And angels, I ask that you lift and clear our burdens, for what might feel heavy to us will be as light as a feather to you. And angels, I ask that you help each one of our beloveds come into the realization of the beauty of their spirit. And dear ones, just take a nice deep breath in and out, allowing waves of love to flow over you, clearing away anything that is not yours, anything that you no longer need to carry. This may sound like an odd metaphor, but the other day I went through the car wash with my car, not just me. My car and I went through the car wash. And I often think of this energy like going through an energetic car wash. You know, like a divine lint roller, just helping to clear off anything we might have picked up that isn't really a reflection of our true essence. You are a big, beautiful soul. You are a miracle from on high. You carry so much love in your heart, and this world is better because you are here. The angels want to remind you of this. And they also want to remind you that you have permission to rest. Whether resting right now means falling asleep, or whether for you rest means just slowing things down a little bit. You know, we process life curriculum multidimensionally. So the busyness of life is not just happening within our schedules, right? If you have a lot going on that day, but we're processing a lot emotionally, energetically, and in consciousness these days. And so our need for rest has increased. So if you're just sitting around and reading a book or watching a movie on Netflix, you might think you're not doing anything and judging yourself because you're not being productive. But you are providing an opportunity for the many dimensions of your beingness to rest and replenish. And we need this more than we know. I certainly have found over the years that I require expanses of no thingness, as the Osho Zen Tarot deck calls it. Moments of quiet where I am not required to participate in any way. So that might look like I'm watching television or scrolling through TikToks. But I am in a place of getting to be passive and quiet, and I'm not required to interact in the world and process external conversation or interactions. I get to simply be. And I will tell you, I find that the deeper I go into this work, the more essential that is to my well-being. If my schedule gets too stacked, it's hard for me. I used to love having a busy schedule. When I was younger, we would keep the little folio diaries. And I loved it when I looked at my week and I had something going every day. I was like, this is going to be an awesome week. Now, I love having days when I have nothing. It's awesome. It doesn't mean I do nothing, but it means that I get to choose what I want to do, where I want to go, how I want to use my life force. And the good news is, the days that I do my sessions and teach my classes, I love those days too because they are so fulfilling. So I feel like I have the best of both worlds. The things on my schedule that I get to do each week are things I love, and I look forward to them. And then I also am fortunate in the work that I do that I can have wide expanses of no thingness. So, to bring this back around to you, I support you in giving yourself time to rest and relax and spend time in no-thingness because it truly is restorative. So take a big deep breath in and breathe in the love. And the angels are with you, filling the space you are in with beautiful divine light. And go ahead and soak this into your body and allow yourself to come into a place of rest. And if you are in bed and getting ready to sleep, you just go ahead and drift off whenever you are ready. And the angels will be with you, watching over you. And while you rest, I'm going to tell you a story. So I didn't know what this episode's story time was going to be about until I was laying in bed this morning in the wee hours of the morning. And I started remembering summer vacations as a kid. And I thought I would share with you some of the summer vacations we had as a family when I was growing up. So this would be the late 60s and early to mid 70s. As a kid, for me, growing up, summer vacation was just a given. It was so awesome. We would get to be out of school for 3 months. I hated school. So not being in school and getting to do fun things was my favorite time of year. And throughout the summer, my mom would schedule different activities for us. So we would go to summer camp, a day camp. As we got older, we might go to a sleepaway camp. We took classes at the JCC and at the Park District. So it wasn't just staying home, but there was always some activity going on. But every summer, as a family, we would also go on vacation. Now, we were a middle-class family. And back then, that meant we had a house, we had a car, and my parents could send us to things like camp and classes and things like that. But I also know now, reflecting back on things, that we were not wealthy. So here's in my little kid mind how I knew that. Some of my classmates, for their vacations, they would get to fly places. And listen, to me, the grandest vacation of all was those friends who got to fly in a plane and go to Los Angeles and go to Disneyland. Back in my day, as a child, Disneyland was the holy grail of vacation destinations. And whoever got to go to Disneyland would come back and tell the rest of us all about it. And my memory of that time was that air travel was not as common. I mean, it certainly was available. But now I think people just take their whole family on a plane and go places. And that was not as prevalent when I was growing up. I actually didn't take my first plane ride until I was in the 8th grade and did the class trip to Washington, D.C. But I don't mean to make this sound like we were bereft of amazing vacation opportunities. I just have to reflect that as a child, I never got to experience the mecca of childhood vacation destinations, which would have been Disneyland and Los Angeles, because I was obsessed with LA because I watched the Brady Bunch and all the other shows that were filmed there. So of course I moved there as soon as I was old enough. But back to summer vacations as a child. So I've already established that in our family, we didn't fly for vacations. I would imagine that would have been extremely expensive back then. I think airfare was much more expensive back then compared to the average household income than it is now. So we fly much more frequently now as a society than we did back then. So our vacations were based in taking road trips. So I grew up before the age of minivans and SUVs. So most families had a station wagon. And we had the archetypal paneled station wagon. It was, I think, gold or brown with brown paneling along the sides. So anytime you see a movie from that era, you will see a station wagon that looked like ours. My father had been a navigator in the Air Force, and so he was the master of maps. Because remember, this is before the internet. So if you were planning a trip somewhere, you would need all the maps and plan out how you were going to get from here to there. Now, every year we did local road trips where we might just stay a night or two. And certainly one of those from my childhood that I remember is going to the Wisconsin Dells. Maybe it was a 2-hour drive, 3-hour drive from Chicago where we lived, or Skokie to be more specific. And Wisconsin Dells was this tourist destination. It was a town that existed to bring in the tourists. And the highlight of the Wisconsin Dells, well, first of all, there was a boat tour that would take you through the different formations of the rocks, and there were different places you could visit. And the highlight was the Tommy Bartlett water show. And you would go and you would sit on these bleachers at the edge of a lake. And the Tommy Bartlett water show was acrobatic water skiing. That as a kid was amazing. We loved this. And there were fireworks and flags and like all kinds of things. You know, we had grown up in the era of things like Bozo's Circus and Ed Sullivan. So spectacles like the Tommy Bartlett water show were super cool as a kid. And then I seem to remember that while the cars were parked in the parking lot, or in the field probably, I don't know that it was even a paved lot, it was probably a field somewhere, that they put Tommy Bartlett bumper stickers on the cars, which would so not be cool these days. But then throughout the year, you would see all of these cars driving through the Chicago area that would have the Tommy Bartlett water show sticker, and you knew that they had gone to the Wisconsin Dells for their vacation. I don't remember a lot else about the Wisconsin Dells other than we would go, and it would be fun. And the other thing that was always a highlight of any vacation we were on was the hotel swimming pool. Like, we all loved to swim. And to get to have a pool at the hotel was one of the highlights. And then we would also get to eat in restaurants, because eating out was not an everyday thing growing up. Fast food existed, but it wasn't the kind of thing where you would eat there every day. Like, people eat fast food and eat in restaurants or eat takeout or takeaway much more frequently than we did when I was growing up. So that we would get to eat out every meal was a big deal. And so we start off with the Wisconsin Dells. Then we would usually take a longer trip, a 10-day trip. God bless my parents. I do not know how they did this. So my father who was always building something. My father was a MacGyver. He was very capable of doing many things. And, there were 3 kids and 2 adults and a station wagon. So there really wasn't room for our luggage. So they sold and rented luggage carriers that would fit on top of a station wagon. But I'm assuming we didn't have the money for that because my father built a luggage carrier out of plywood. It was a monstrosity, but it worked. I don't know how to describe it to you. It's like it had a rectangle, but then it had two angles on it, I guess to help with wind resistance kind of thing. And then it had a lid that was padlocked somehow. And the reason I remember this so clearly is until the moment we had to clear out my parents' house after my mother passed away, that luggage carrier was still on sawhorses in our garage. So this luggage carrier has been a part of our family lore for a really, really long time. So we had this paneled station wagon with this huge brown wood luggage carrier somehow secured to the roof rack. And I seem to recall, so my dad would almost always drive. My mom would not drive on these vacations. My dad was the pilot. He was the navigator. And I think my brother probably sat in the front seat because I have a memory of my mother in the back seat. And I imagine that they did this because otherwise my brother, my sister, and I would fight. We were, some families, like all the siblings get along and take good care of each other. Well, in my family, my sister and I got along, but we fought. But we absolutely fought with my brother. Like, my brother was 4 years older than me and 6 years older than my sister. And so I think they put my brother in the front seat and my mother in the back seat so there would be some real estate between us as kids, because otherwise it would be like, he's touching me. Or he would pull his hair, like, just kid stuff, nothing horrible, just kid stuff. And I also would remember in the back seat would be a big cooler that my mom would, fill with food for us so we would have snacks on the way. And then in the back of the station wagon, laying flat, they would put down these foam pads like you might put down if you were going to sleep on the ground, and some blankets, and my sister and I would lay down flat in the back of the station wagon, which we thought was super cool. And we had comic books. We were very much into the Archies and the Richie Riches back then. And I remember one summer we had these little plastic dinosaur toys that had been some kind of giveaway from the local gas station whose mascot was a dinosaur. Sunoco, I think, maybe, I don't remember, was an S name. And so we each had our dinosaurs. There was a little storage well on each side of the back of the station wagon. So we would keep our dinosaurs in the little wells next to us. And we would just have the best time back there. And we would sleep. And we would sometimes sit up and play games, and we would get excited when there were cows, something like, there's cows, and we would get, farm animals were a big deal because we grew up in the suburbs. So if there were cows or something interesting on the road, we would, of course, sit up and look, and so my parents would time it out so that, we would drive for 6 hours or so, and then we would hit a destination where we would stay. And My mother was a big believer in exposing us to history, historical places. I really wanted to go to Disneyland. I didn't want to learn anything on my vacation. School was out of session. It was Laurel time. And my mom, and probably my dad too, I just remember my mom being the driving force of this. She wanted to expose us to culture, to history. And so our vacations were really built around taking us to different places and exposing us to historical landmarks and things like that, which as a kid, I wasn't terribly interested in. I just wanted to get to the hotel and I wanted to get to the pool. Also, I wanted to go to the restaurant and get to have a meal. These were the things that were important to me. And the whole time I was aware it was not Disneyland, which was, again, my big dream. One of the things I remember about being a child of that age, especially when I was much younger, is the absolute orientation to self of that age, right? Everything's about me. Not in a horrible, bratty way, but more, consciousness hasn't yet developed to make space for other people yet. It's I wanted to go to Disneyland. And all I got was Tommy Bartlett's water show and some saltwater taffy. Somehow saltwater taffy always came with a vacation. It never occurred to me that you could just have saltwater taffy in Skokie during a regular month. Saltwater taffy to me only existed as an option on vacation. That and the hard candy sticks, those old-timey, candy sticks that you would get at a truck stop or something, and there would be all the different flavors. And the big decision of childhood was what flavor to get. And there was always one of the sticks that was multicolored, and I don't know, it had a flavor, a berry, cherry flavor or something. And I always remember getting that one, even though it wasn't my favorite flavor, but because it was the prettiest. So all of this melts together to my summer vacation memories. And one of the motels, remember learning the difference, I learned the difference between a motel and a hotel. A motel was a motor lodge. And so a motel was where you would drive up with your car and then get a room, versus a hotel. It might have a lot of stories and you wouldn't have access to your car. So we always stayed in motels, and the motel of choice was the Howard Johnson. I think just about anyone who took road trip vacations in that day and age stayed at Howard Johnson's. And they were always easy to see from the highway because they had orange roofs. They were turquoise with orange roofs, and that was the Howard Johnson's. They would always have a pool, and they always would have the Hojo's restaurant attached, which was a big deal. Because one of the things about getting to go to the Hojo's restaurant, or any restaurant on the road trip, was as a child, I had choice. I got to choose what I wanted. During the regular life, my mother would choose what we ate because she was making it, so that makes sense, right? My mom wasn't one of these moms who just made something different for each one of us. My mom made a dish and that's what we all had, for the most part. I mean, she knew what each of us liked. I don't mean to make this sound horrible, like she just made us eat, broccoli. She made good food. But there was this joy of autonomy when we were on vacation that we, specifically I, got to pick what I wanted. and we all could have something different. And if we all had something different, I could also possibly taste something that somebody else had. Specifically, usually my mother or father, because I don't think either one of my siblings was big on sharing back then, nor was I. So I just remember going into Howard Johnson's restaurant, and they would always put the child's menu in front of us, which usually had big pictures. So if it was for breakfast, there was always some variation of the happy face pancake. It might have bananas on the pancakes, or chocolate chip eyes, or a slice of bacon for the mouth. Sorry, my vegetarian friends. And we didn't eat bacon in our house. We were Jewish, but on the road, on vacation, we had bacon. My father loved bacon, even though he was raised an Orthodox Jew. But he could have bacon outside of the house. Strange rules, but it all worked out. And I always remember ordering something that had that made-up face, like a pancake, right, that had strawberries or something on it that made a happy face. Or the silver dollar pancakes. I loved those. How many of you remember that? So silver dollars in U.S. currency back then were not terribly big, bigger than a quarter though. So silver dollar pancakes were the size of silver dollars, and you would get a lot of them. So I remember loving to order silver dollar pancakes. I seem to remember back then pancakes, of course, came with syrup, but somehow whipped cream was involved. And I shared with you just recently about when a maraschino cherry is involved in a meal, you know it's a good thing, or a dessert. And I seem to remember whipped cream and maraschino cherries were often involved in whatever pancake thing I got for breakfast as a kid. If it was lunch or dinner, it probably was a hamburger. Probably hamburger and french fries. This is before chicken fingers and chicken tenders were a thing. You know, I think once chicken tenders and chicken nuggets were introduced, chicken fingers and french fries became a child's meal. That's very common now, but that wasn't common as a kid. So I'm sure there was some variation of a hamburger involved. I seem to recall my dad would get a turkey club. And I was not allowed to get a turkey club because it was too much food and I was too small. But I remember that they would come in fours and quarters, and my dad would let me have a bite. I think that this is one of the most generous things a parent can do, is to share a bite of their food with their kid. Because both of my parents would share bites of things with me. And I loved that because I got to taste different things. I don't know, I seem to remember my mom getting a tuna fish sandwich, or I don't know, whatever they would get for their meals. But the big event was breakfast for me as a kid, because pancakes, right, with possible whipped cream and maraschino cherry encounter happening. At some point there was saltwater taffy. I'm sure there were ice cream cones. I think Howard Johnson's also had ice cream cones, I seem to remember. They had different flavors of ice cream. And then, of course, there were the pools. So this was the highlight for me of any trip we were on. In the meanwhile, my mother was trying to bring us culture and learning. God bless her. So some of the things we did is we had one vacation where we drove to all the original 13 colonies. I don't remember much about it. I know we went to see Gettysburg, and we saw whatever the presentation was that they had at Gettysburg at the time. I know we visited the Amish country. I know we visited places in Boston. And we seemed to always go to the East Coast, never to the West Coast. But I think we went to the East Coast because my mom's sister lived in Connecticut at the time. She would then move out to the West Coast. But my mom had two sisters, my Aunt Jane, who lived near us in the Chicago area, and my Aunt Iris, who we called Aunt Ike, who lived first in the Connecticut area, and then she moved out to the San Jose area. And she was a librarian at Yale. And so I remember we would sort of move towards Connecticut on these vacations. And at some point, we would end up at Aunt Ike's, and we would stay with her. And we would go to the ocean, and I had never seen the tide go out before. And I just remember being so confused by how far out the tide would go, and then it would come in, and that there were all kinds of shell creatures on the beach when the tide went out. And I was so confused by that. Again, how a child's mind processes these things. I just remember having to walk over a lot of shells to get to wherever I was going, and I didn't like that. And so I think we would stay with her. I don't quite remember. But so I think many of our vacations wound up on the East Coast so we could have time with her. And she was a great aunt. I always loved getting to see Aunt Ike. She was a wonderful person, and I always enjoyed my time with her. We also several times went up to Niagara Falls, which was a great vacation as a kid. Niagara Falls, I don't know what it's like these days, but there's a lot to take in about Niagara Falls in childhood. And we would always go on the Maid of the Mist, which is the big boat tour you would go on, and they would give you a rain jacket because you would go near the falls, not under them. You can't go under the falls, they're too strong. But you would go near them, and the splash from the waterfall from Niagara Falls would get you wet. And I also remember everywhere you go, the restaurants and the hotels and Niagara Falls themselves, there's always a story about somebody who tried to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel and didn't make it. None of those stories end well. Again, saltwater taffy's involved. I don't know why I am so deeply imprinted with food. It's just the way it is. So we would go to Niagara Falls, and we would also go to Niagara Falls at night. And they would light up the falls with colored lights, and it was beautiful. And for years we had postcards of Niagara Falls posted around our house on the refrigerator or something. I do remember one day on vacation, we must have been all tired because we'd been at this for a while, and we were supposed to visit Plymouth Rock, and I didn't want to go. I thought it was just a rock. Like, listen, my mother and father had exposed me to a lot of historical monuments and stuff, and they usually were some edifice of some kind with a plaque, and someone would tell you about it. I thought that was boring. I remember just being such a crabby, bratty, God bless my heart, kid. And I was like, it's a rock. I don't want to go to the rock. I just want to go to the pool. And my mother was crestfallen that her kids didn't want to go to Plymouth Rock. We just wanted to be in the pool. And so we never did go to Plymouth Rock. But I specifically remember that argument of, it's just a rock, Mom. It's just dumb. I don't want to go. I want to go to the pool. Right? It's like, what's important to a kid. And I'll never forget that. So my only memory about Plymouth Rock is that we never went because I thought it was just a stupid rock versus a settlement where there was something we could learn. And what's so funny about that story as I tell it to you is I am positive had we actually gone to Plymouth Rock, I would have no memory of it. But since it was one of those awkward arguments, that imprinted with me. It's so weird how difficulties stay in our memories sometimes more than the everyday beautiful moments. There's another vacation-related memory that I'm not going to share with you, but it was one of those that imprinted and fossilized with me. It was just one of those memories that is deeply uncomfortable and just God bless my heart. I was young. I was about 8 years old, and it doesn't really matter what it is. It matters to me, but it's not this big, huge deal. But it just was a very awkward, difficult experience, and how that imprints with me more than all the wonderful moments that also happened around that, right? So I remember the argument about Plymouth Rock more than I would likely have remembered actually going there, because here it is all these years later, decades later, and I can tell you about the swimming pools and the silver dollar pancakes and the lights and the Maid of the Mist of Niagara Falls and the Tommy Bartlett water show. But I can't tell you what we saw in all of the 13 colonies. There was Gettysburg, something in Boston. I don't know what else. Isn't that funny how different brains catalog things differently? I'm sure if I asked my sister what she remembered about the vacations, she would have a whole different subset of memories than the ones that I have. So, those were our summer vacations, these road trips that we would drive in this huge loop for 10 days in the paneled station wagon with the huge luggage carrier that my father built with his own 2 hands, and my brother helped him build it. And it stayed in our household until we had to finally let go of the house in 2019. That thing was rock solid. It was hard to move, but it served its purpose. And that memory about how they separated us from my brother so that we wouldn't, poke and tease each other like kids do. Again, nothing horrible, just, kid stuff. And so God bless my mom. She had to sit in the back seat to separate us. But then she also could hand us a snack or a drink or something if we needed it. So God bless my parents. This must have really been an endeavor. 3 kids, a station wagon, planning out the itinerary. I can only imagine the conversations and research my parents did in preparation for these vacations. And I can only imagine my father needed a vacation from the vacation. My mom too, probably. Right? Driving, kids complaining, swimming pools. I will always have the memory of the smell of chlorine from these vacations. It's funny, I have not been in a pool in easily a decade. And by the time you hear this, the trip will have already happened. But I'm taking a short trip to Palm Desert to visit with my sister and her family. They're coming out, and I'm going to have a few days with them, which I'm really looking forward to. But again, by the time you hear this, that will have already happened. And they rented a house, an Airbnb with a pool. And I don't have a swimsuit anymore, but I have an old one that has been tucked away in a drawer for at least 10 years. And I went to take it out to see if it would still fit, if it was still a viable option for me. And it still smells of chlorine. And I just think that scent of chlorine immediately takes me back to summer as a child. And that swimsuit didn't work, so I had to go buy another one, which I now have a new swimsuit. So if you would like to invite me to your island getaway or out on your boat or to your pool, I now have the appropriate garment to wear that does not yet smell like chlorine, but the beautiful sensory memories of these summer vacations. And I just want to send a huge wave of love and gratitude to my parents, Jack and Phyllis, who were really committed to giving us a good childhood. And my parents' desire to let us experience history when all we really wanted to do was to go to the amusement parks and play in the pool and eat pancakes. So I just love my parents. They were wonderful parents, and they really tried hard to make sure we got a good education, that we understood about the greater world, that we understood about music and the arts. They were very invested as parents. And so I just want to say thank you, Mom and Dad. I'm so grateful for you. And thank you for our summer vacations. And I'm sorry for all the times I was really difficult about them and I caused you strife. Please forgive me. I was just a little kid. I know you know this. But I'm just sending healing light across the timeline of my life to all of those moments. And Mom, I'm sorry about Plymouth Rock. Daddy, I'm sorry about that time in the pool. And I'm sorry for all the difficulty that I caused you and that I did not appreciate what you were bringing forward for us. And I am so deeply grateful that I got to have such a wonderful childhood where I got to experience so much of this country. And my heart is just filled with love and gratitude. I will also have you know I did not make it to Disneyland until I was in my 20s. But this is a cool story. The first time I went to Disney was with my cousins. So my cousins had two little girls who are also my cousins, one of whom, Kathy, who listens to this broadcast. So Kathy, if you made it this far, hi. And they came out from Chicago to LA for vacation, and they were going to Disney, and they invited me to go with them. So what was so cool was the first time I got to go to Disney, I was in my 20s, but I got to go with my two cousins who were little girls. So I got to experience it through their eyes. So that was wonderful. So in some ways, I did get to experience Disney in a really special way with my cousins and through the eyes of the little girls. So I do have beautiful, warm Disney memories. I'm not a Disney person these days. It's way too crowded for me. But I did wind up getting to go to Disney several different times. And one other time, which was super cool, a guy who I worked with at Goldwyn had a friend who worked at Xerox. And one evening, Xerox bought out the park for their employees. And somehow we got looped into that deal. So there was one time in my 20s when me and my friends, my mother would be horrified, my friends and I, my friends and I got to go to Disney at a corporate event. And listen, Xerox may have a lot of employees, but it's not enough to fill up Disney. So we could go on all the rides, and there were no waits, and we had the park to ourselves, and it was awesome. And I don't think I've been to a Disney park easily in 30 years probably. Maybe a little less, because I think I had to go to Disney World for a business function somewhere around 95. So maybe a little less than 30 years. I did go to Disney World for a different corporate event, but they hadn't bought out the park where I went to Epcot and all of that stuff. I just remember being really hot. It was hot and humid. So those are my vacation memories. Wonderful memories. But especially that station wagon. And laying on the back with my sister while, God bless my dad, he was our navigator, he was our pilot, guiding us to our destination that he and my mom had planned out so that we could experience historical places. And we were interested in the pool and the restaurants. So, I'm glad to share these memories with you. Thank you for allowing me to share this piece of my heart with you. So may you have sweet dreams of saltwater taffy and pancakes with whipped cream and maraschino cherries and cool, breezy road trips that fill your heart with love. So thank you so much. I love you, I appreciate you, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.